who have given me this opportunity to present this topic in front of you. As my previous speaker, Dr. Sivaprakash, he was so passionate about development. One of the neglected areas in pediatric teaching, both in UG as well as PG, is in the region of complementary feeding. Now, we all speak about breastfeeding, but what after the exclusive breastfeeding? What after 6 months? Probably it was taught in a much better way earlier. Nowadays, this is getting diluted. Somehow, this is not being given its due importance. I would like to start with this slide. We always worry about the weight of the child as a marker for growth. But if you are worried about linear growth of a child, that is the length or height of a child, what is going to affect its length? What is the modifiable risk factor? Is an improved complementary feeding. An improved complementary feeding is directly proportional to the linear growth of a child. In fact, why should we speak about complementary feeding? Undernutrition is associated with at least 45% of child deaths. This is throughout the world. Less than 1/4 of children in the age group of 6 to 24 months receive a food which is diverse and which is adequate. But if you see Indian data, it is only 10% of Indian children who meet this criteria of minimum acceptable diet. This is NFHS 4 data, which is as recent as 2015-16. And iron deficiency anemia is found in 59% of under 5 children. This is again the latest data, which was 70% 10 years ago, is now improved to 59%, but it is still very high. So why should we study complementary feeding? No, I want to study complementary feeding like we study guidelines on dengue. Like dengue guidelines change. Okay, WHO has changed this guideline once after 3 years, after new evidence has come in. Do we study complementary feeding like an evidence-based science? Usually what my professor has taught me, what my parents has taught me, many a time pediatricians' advice regarding complementary feeding is in sync with what they know as a family rather than what they know as a pediatrician. So that's what we are trying to correct, an evidence-based, science-based approach to complementary feeding. Coming to what is complementary feeding, WHO has defined it as a process starting when breast milk alone is no longer sufficient to meet the nutritional requirements of infants, and therefore other foods are needed along with breast milk. Each and every word of it is important. So when breast milk alone is not sufficient, you give something more along with breast milk, along with continued breast milk. So that's why the term of weaning is no longer preferred. We are not weaning away from the breast. We are just supplementing or complementing the breast milk. Along with that, we are adding other foods. Essentially, we mean it is a period of transition from exclusive breastfeeding to family food, complete family food, which happens by 2 years of age. So roughly from 6 to 24 months is the period for complementary feeding. What are the ideal characteristics for a complementary feeding, for good complementary feeding? It should be timely. Just when the need for energy and nutrient exceeds what can be provided through exclusive breastfeeding, it should be started. It should neither be early, it should nor be delayed. And it should be adequate to provide sufficient energy, proteins, micronutrients to meet a growing child's nutritional needs. Now, we know the first 2 years of life is the most rapid phase of growth. So that should be adequate to meet the needs. It should be safe, obviously. It should be hygienically prepared, stored and fed to the child. And it should be appropriate. Not only appropriate texture, appropriately fed. how we are feeding, how we are emotionally, socially, we are feeding the child, that should again be appropriate. But our feeding practices are dependent on so many factors. In fact, these feeding practices in the early infancy is the forerunner for our later eating behavior. So, if a caregiver has a feeding style and method which will result in a later eating behavior based on probably social influences like TV. So it is not only based on the child's physical development, but also on the family, socio-demographic features, what food is available, what is the influence of environment. So all these factors influence the development of eating behavior in a child. So why are we worried about this period of complementary feeding? Because we know the 1,000-day concept period from birth to 2 years is a critical window for promotion of optimal growth and development. It is the time which forms the future healthy food preferences, or for that matter, unhealthy food preferences. It is the peak age for growth faltering, micronutrient deficiencies, otherwise called as hidden hunger, and other common childhood illnesses like diarrhea. As I said in the initial part, stunting once happened in less than 2 years of life can never be reversed, can never be reversed. So whatever you do after 2 years of age, the stunting which happened is not going to reverse. Probably that is the reason why probably in countries like India, we do have a lower average height compared to a Western standard. This, they may have some racial differences, but see the height of these children when they move to a environment where there is much better complementary feeding. And you also have problems due to immediate like illnesses with morbidity, mortality, and delayed development, where it also has a long-term outcome like impairments in intellect, work capacity, that their future national health depends upon what complementary food the child receives before 2 years of age. Coming to the issues in complementary feeding, the first issue is when to start. We all know around 6 months of age, the requirements of energy, protein, and other nutrients, essentially critical nutrients like iron and zinc, cannot be met by breast milk alone. This was done by Barker and BMJ, published in BMJ in 1990 itself. So when to start also depends upon, can you start early? Can you start at birth? No, your gastrointestinal and renal function is not mature to handle solid foods. So your renal solute load will be much higher. But by 4 months of age, this physiological requirement of maturation of GI and renal function is complete. By 5 months, developmentally also the child is ready. Your tongue thrust reflex is lost. Child is able to sit with support in mother's lap. There is good enough head and neck control. The baby is able to open mouth in anticipation for food. The baby is able to reach for objects, as my previous speaker said. So is it right that once the child is developmentally ready, you start feeding? WHO has defined 6 months or completion of 180 days as the period for complementary feeding. What happens if you start early? Very early introduction of complementary foods, especially if it is before 4 months of age, can increase the risk of childhood obesity, respiratory symptoms, choking hazards, allergic diseases like eczema. If you delay complementary feeding beyond 6 months, there is a higher chance of malnutrition. There is an even higher chance of iron deficiency and iron deficiency anemia. In developed countries, especially ESPGHAN and EFSA, the European Food Sensing Authority, they give an age group or an age range of 17 to 26 weeks. You can start complementary feeding once the 17 completed weeks, and you should not delay it beyond 26 completed weeks. But developmentally ready, that itself is not an indication to start complementary feeding. In fact, the feeding recommendations, whether it is by WHO, AAP, or ESPGHAN, they are recommended for populations but each and every individual child is a unique species. So this cannot be done without a healthcare provider's consultation. So complementary feeding is like an immunization. So once your probably 3.5 months vaccine is complete, you need to see the child for growth as well as development, as well as if the child is faltering on growth. So the recommendation should ultimately be based on the developmental readiness of the child, but also on the nutritional status of the child, that is the growth status, the general health status of the child, whether that family is ready for complementary feeding, looking at the economic as well as the socio-cultural attitude towards the diet. You cannot have a single point agenda that this child at this age should receive. What is very clear is it should not be delayed beyond 6 months of age. So essentially, summing up this part of the lecture, breastfeeding to complementary feeding, forgive me for using the term weaning. So we should not use the term weaning. It is always complementary feeding, will depend upon breastfeeding to family diet based on responsive feeding principles, the parental education status, parental wealth. Yeah, it is going to play a role. So if you are going to give a inferior complementary diet at 5 months of age, it is better to give superior breastfeeding and wait till 6 months of age, then start complementary feeding. Also, depending upon cultural factors, which diet are you going to give as a complementary feeding, and by repeated exposure for foods and by attaining sufficient biological maturity, we reach the stage where the child is able to take a family food or a family diet. Coming to the next part, how much amount of food is to be given to the child as a complementary food? No, whenever I see guidelines on dengue, we see 3 ml, 10 ml. Previously, we used to have different guidelines. So how much amount of food for complementary feeding? It is not, however, I can say about that, it should be based on some science. You can have this excellent article of Dewey and Brown written in 2003 on the intrinsic technical aspects regarding complementary feeding, where they have assessed what is the need, based on what guidelines, based on what studies, how many children are going to need. So essentially between 6 to 8 months of age, a child needs around 600 calories per day, 9 to 11 months 700, and between 12 to 24 months 900. This is the requirement of total caloric requirement. But from complementary feeding alone, a 6 to 8 month child will require around 200, that is roughly 1/3. From 9 to 11 months 300, roughly around half. From 12 to 24 months around 550 to 600, that is around 2/3 of the total requirement should be from the complementary feeding alone. These principles should be based on responsive feeding. How are you going to deliver this much amount of food is based on energy density as well as meal frequency, which I will discuss in the next slide. This meal frequency and energy density will depend upon what is the child's gastric capacity, what is the energy density of the food which we are going to give, and how frequently we are going to give. The gastric capacity of a child is estimated to be 30 grams per kg of body weight. So a 6 kg baby will have a gastric capacity of 180 grams. That's the baby's gastric capacity. Why I have mentioned the minimum energy density as 0.8 kilocalories per gram? So if you prepare a thicker food, energy dense food, it can go as high as 1.1 kilocalories per gram. But if you prepare a thin gruel or a soup or a juice, it can go down as low as 0.3 kilocalories per gram. So how much frequently are you going to give and how much you are going to give will depend upon this energy density. So all the recommendations which has been proposed by various authorities presume that the complementary foods given are of an energy density of roughly 0.8 kilocalories per gram. That's the presumption which they have made. So if you are going to give a more dilute feed, either you are going to give more amount or more in frequency. Amount can't be changed because gastric capacity cannot be increased. So you have to increase the frequency. If you are going to give a thicker and energy dense food, you can decrease the frequency. That's how it works. For this much amount of energy density, you need to give 2 to 3 times per day during 6 to 8 months, 3 to 4 times during 9 to 11 months, and 4 to 5 times during day, that is 1 to 2 years, with 1 or 2 nutritious snacks per day. It is nutritious snacks, not junk food. Obviously, this is variable depending upon breast milk intake, number of feeds, and the energy density of the feeds. Often we get this question from the mothers, how can I make my complementary foods energy dense? Is there a mechanism? How are we going to advise? By adding fats. This is the easiest way without increasing the volume, because gastric capacity is constant. Without increasing the volume, if you want to increase the caloric density or energy density, you need to add fats, either oil or ghee. Adding sugar or jaggery, it is permitted for developing countries because where malnutrition is rampant. But as far as developed countries are concerned, added sugar is not permitted for improving even the energy density. We'll see it about later. The next best thing is to give malted foods. What is malting? It is essentially germinating either cereals or pulses and then drying and then grinding.
ஒழுங்கா ட்ரெஸ் எல்லாம் பண்ணிட்டு இருக்கலாம்னு சொன்னேன் நானு. சும்மா இருந்தாலும்
ஜாலியா இருக்கட்டும். என்னப்பா சண்டே?
Kindly mute. Sir, kindly mute.
சொல்டா எப்படிடா இருக்க?
ஏதோ ஓடிட்டு இருக்கா. நமக்கு என்ன இல்ல தபரதா. இந்த மீட்டிங்ல ஓடிட்டு இருக்கு.
Sir, kindly other participants please mute.
I am academician.
Dr. Aram please mute. Dr. Sendil, Dr. Suresh Balan please mute.
ஆமா அதுல एक्चुअली குழந்தை மருத்துவர் அதுல ஆனா இதுல ஸ்பெஷலிஸ்ட்.
Dr. Sendil please mute.
அவனுங்க விடலையா தான் இருந்தா இப்ப அடக்கி வச்சிருக்கு. அடக்கி போய் கிடக்குறான்.
Dr. Sendil, can you please mute?
நண்பர்கள் நிறைய சில பேர் தான் உண்மையான நண்பர்களா இருப்பாங்க. எல்லாருடையும் நண்பர்களா இருப்போம். சில பேர் அவங்களுக்கும் உண்மையா இருப்பாங்க.
DIP Akshida. DIP Akshida.
Dr. Suresh Balan, Dr. Sendil, kindly mute.
Sir, I have muted, sir. I am asking the DIP to mute Dr. Sendil.
எல்லாருமே கூட 10வது வரைக்கும் படித்தவர்கள், உறவினர்கள், அம்மா வழியில இவன் உறவு, இவனும் எங்க அம்மாவும் எங்க அம்மாவும் நட்பு நட்பு.
Please continue, Dr. Karamat. Sorry for that.
No problem. So the third strategy is malting of foods. How does it improve energy density? It is not going to directly increase energy density, but it reduces the viscosity of feed so that the child can eat more. If a child is eating less and less, child has eating issues, if you malt the complementary feeding, if you use malting technique, it can improve it can lower the viscosity, thereby allowing the child to eat more. So this malting can also be mentioned as amylase rich flour. Okay. And finally, by increasing the thickness of mixtures, whenever you prepare, instead of a thin puree, if you prepare a thicker mixture, you are going to increase the energy density. Finally, coming to the concept of minimum acceptable diet, which I alluded to in my second slide. So you need to have a diverse diet. You need to have a minimum meal frequency so that your diet is an acceptable diet. For that purpose, WHO has divided your complementary feeds into 7 food groups. The first group being grains, roots, and tubers, primarily carbohydrate source, legumes and nuts, dairy products, flesh foods, that is non-vegetarian like meat, fish, and poultry, eggs as a separate group, vitamin A rich fruits and vegetables like GYOR, that is green, yellow, orange, and red fruits and vegetables, and other fruits and vegetables. Out of this, if we are taking or if we are giving the baby 4 out of 7 groups per day, That means the child is taking a minimum dietary diversity. The child is receiving a diet which is having a minimum dietary diversity. So every day you need to have 4 out of 7 groups. And the meal frequency, which I have told in the last slide, like 2 to 3 in 6 to 8 months, 3 to 4 in 9 to 11 months, and 4 to 5 in 12 to 24 months. That's the minimum meal frequency. If both these criteria are met, then it is called minimum acceptable diet. As I said, India only has around 9.6% of children receiving minimum acceptable diet. But a silver lining is Tamil Nadu stands first, where around 31% receive, 31% of under 5 children receive minimum acceptable diet. You might have rejection of food, that is common. It can be overridden by repeated unforced presentation again and again in different forms. So this is what I alluded to in the last slide. Minimum acceptable diet throughout India is only 9.6%. But in Tamil Nadu, it is little higher at around 31%. We often see so many recommendations regarding nutrient intakes, dietary reference intakes. This itself was called as RNIs, recommended nutrient intakes. Now we call it as DRIs, dietary reference intakes. Each of them have different terminologies. We might not understand what these terminologies are. Estimated average requirement is where 50% of children what needs to take to avoid deficiencies. That is the estimated average requirement. Estimated average requirement plus 2 standard deviations, so that 97% children are covered. That is RDA, recommended dietary allowance. If you can't have an estimated average requirement for any nutrient, then you take it as adequate intake. Adequate intake is what is observed in 50% of population. For toxic ingredients, you have tolerable upper limit. So whenever some study or some pharma rep is speaking about some nutrient, we need to understand what they are speaking, whether it is RDA, whether it is EAR, whether it is adequate intake or about the upper limit. And we need to understand about problem nutrients. Problem nutrients are those for which there is a greatest discrepancy between the content in complementary feeds and the estimated requirement by the child, that is by DRIs, by the dietary reference intakes. So whatever is found in complementary foods and what is recommended, where there is a highest discrepancy, those are problem nutrients. The biggest problem nutrients, as we know, are iron and zinc, in addition vitamin B6, and folate, thiamine, calcium, and vitamin A in many of the developing nations are also problem nutrients. That is, by routine complementary feeding, we are not supplying enough of these nutrients. So coming to the individual nutrient composition, how much of lipids is to be there in a complementary feed? It should be around 30 to 45%. In fact, it might seem a little higher, but if you just think about, breast milk is a high fat diet. So when you introduce complementary foods, again, you need to have this lipids in 30 to 45%, especially in children who are taking low breast milk or no breast milk, the lipid proportion needs to be higher. And proteins around 8 to 15%, roughly you can take it as 10%, but more than the protein content itself, the protein energy ratio of foods needs to be taken. That is the amount of energy provided by the protein within the food. And also we need to look at the quality as well as adequacy of proteins. So a plant protein will be required more in amount compared to an animal protein. But we often think lipid as adipogenic, but high protein diet, especially during complementary feeding, is linked to future adiposity. So you can't go overboard in protein composition of complementary feeds. Coming to micronutrients, yes, definitely these are problem nutrients. We can see the gap. This is for 2 years. Even at 11 months of age, between 9 to 11 months of age, almost 97% of iron is expected only from complementary feeds. So if it is not supplied, there is going to be a huge gap. So coming specifically to iron deficiency anemia, which we are able to measure, which I said about 59%, that represents only the extreme end of iron deficiency. Before that, there is subtle shades of iron deficiency without anemia. And even before that, even before iron deficiency can develop, you can have neurocognitive effects due to iron deficiency. Especially coming to iron, heme iron intake is very low during complementary feeding. But for non-heme iron, you have very low bioavailability. In addition, you have added phytate intake, which will interfere with the iron absorption itself. So foods containing heme iron as foods are combining iron-rich cereals with vitamin C rich food so that the absorption becomes better, or iron fortification, or as a last resort, iron supplementation is needed during complementary feeds to meet this gap. Coming to the consistency of the food, we know we have taken liquid feed, that is milk, in the first 6 months of life. So when you introduce complementary food, we have to gradually increase the food consistency and variety. So you can go ahead and give pureed, mashed, or semi-solid food by 6 months, but you need to progress it to finger foods by 8 months and family foods. Modified, of course, modified family foods by 12 months of age. We need to avoid foods may cause choking, which we'll see in later. And we have to understand children who first receive lumpy foods after 10 months of age, they are more likely to have feeding difficulties by 15 months and even later than that, than those who had lumpy foods by 6 to 9 months. We have an inherent inertia to start textures in our food when we introduce complementary feeding. We go with mother's conviction that the child is able to take mashed foods or pureed foods for 6 months, 7 months, 8 months. The child is continuing to take the same consistency. The child should have no more difficult consistencies as the child grows older. What is the sequence of introduction of complementary food? Is there any science for that? There is no evidence for any specific sequence, but since, as I said, which are the problem nutrients? Iron and zinc. So any food which is rich in iron and zinc should be the first choice and the best choice to start the process. So it can be either meat or grains to start the process of complementary foods. First solid foods are usually individual, boiled, preferably without salt, sweetness, flavors, or preservatives. We often think, parents think that this is not tasty for me, so the baby will not also taste it. No, the baby has their own taste buds. The baby develops sweet taste even at birth, salt and probably umami little later, around 5 to 6 months of age, sour and bitter even later. But we have to introduce these tastes, but you can't add artificial salts or sweeteners. Usually when you start, first time when you start, it is better to go one food at a time at an interval of 2 to 3 days, but it should be fast, rapid, so that within a short span of time, the infant will be consuming all the primary groups. By 7 months, the child should be receiving all the primary group nutrients, meat, cereals, legumes, vegetables, fruits. All these their baby should receive when the child is around 7 months of age. What about water? Many of the parents ask this question. Now we give our own answers. The needs of water are essentially influenced by thermoregulation, especially in hot climates. We have to understand that, and about the physical activity. So as the child becomes more active, your water needs go up. In tropical climates, your water needs go up. But we have to understand milk is 88% water. So a child who's on exclusive breastfeeding doesn't need water at all. A 6 to 8 month child who's just receiving around 200 kilocalories from complementary feeding will require very less of water content. But as the child grows older, as the child is more active, your water needs will become more. So in fact, Germans in their temperate climates say they in second half of infancy, you don't require additional water till all 3 recommended meals are introduced, roughly around 8 to 10 months. That's the time they recommend additional water intake. But we live in a tropical climate. So especially for non-breastfed infants, we need to have more water intake. Even for breastfed infants, you might have to start little early. You can give it a sips along with complementary feeding during 6 to 8 months. After that, in between feeds also, you can introduce water. What about vegetarian diet? Are they restrictive? Because significant proportion of our population is vegetarian. we have to understand the critical nutrients in a vegetarian diet is B12, calcium, vitamin D, iron, zinc, omega-3 fatty acids. But essentially what we mean by vegetarian diet is essentially a lacto-vegetarian diet, which has animal proteins. Milk is an animal protein, especially if they are also lacto-ovo-vegetarian, which many of them agree to. A plant lacto-ovo-vegetarian diet is fine regarding nutrient intake. Strict vegan diet, yes, that is a recipe for growth failure as well as deficiencies, where you need supplementation or fortification essentially to prevent deficiencies. What about allergenic foods as complementary feeding? No, we often see AAP recommendations, older recommendations, not the newer ones, delay introduction of these allergenic foods. All of these recommendations have been changed. Deliberate exclusion or delayed introduction of potentially allergenic foods may in fact paradoxically increase the risk of allergy. So allergenic foods need to be introduced once you have started complementary feeding. It's not even wait for 1 month and then introduce one by one. You can introduce one by one as soon as complementary feeding is started, one food at a time. And again, timing of gluten introduction has no bearing on celiac disease, so it can be introduced again from the beginning of complementary feeding. What about preterm babies? What is the age limit for them? It should be based on the baby's individual development. As I said, starting of complementary feeding is an exercise in itself. It should be done by the doctor, the pediatrician, after examination, after going through the child's growth records, after examining the child, after interacting with the parents. It is not an one-off decision that you say, no, myself is comfortable with this age for initiation of complementary feeding. It should be highly individualized. For preterm babies, it should not be before 4 months after the EDD. However preterm the baby might be, it should not be before 4 months after the EDD. That's the evidence available for that only. Again, otherwise it depends upon only on the baby's development. What about milk? I am speaking about milk during the period of complementary feeding. Ideal is breast milk. Breast milk should be continued up to 2 years and even beyond. And in fact, American Academy of Pediatrics and European Food Standards Authority doesn't recommend unmodified animal milk before 1 year of age. They say strict no. But WHO as well as PAHO, for non-breastfed children especially, they allow animal milk. They allow animal milk, but it is not diluted. The recommendations will vary based on the animal source foods, how much you are giving as complementary food. If you are going to give more animal source foods, the requirement for milk will be lower. If you are going to give less animal source foods, the requirement for milk will be higher. What about in breastfed infants? Breastfed infants, WHO and PAHO allow for milk only for mixing, for pureeing, for that only, not as a main source of drink. In non-breastfed infants, animal source foods, as I said, will become more important. If they are adequate, you need to give around 200 to 400 ml per day. If animal source foods are less, you need to give 300 to 500 ml per day. This might seem less, but that's the recommendation. Most of our mothers overzealously give more amount of milk, thereby depriving of other nutrients and other group of foods. Complementary feeding has gone a change over the years. This is the newer forms of complementary feeds, where we call it as baby-led weaning. Essentially, what we mean is emphasizes on self-feeding, even at the start of complementary feeding. Instead of spoon feeding by caregivers, the baby is allowed to feed. Here, finger feeding may start even by 6 months. Sometimes the risks associated with this are choking, gagging, as well as because iron-rich complementary feeds are delayed, you might have malnutrition or you might have anemia. So they try to reduce the risk of choking by baby-led introduction to solids or BLISS, where the choking hazard is minimized, but the studies for BLISS or baby-led weaning are very few. But whatever studies, they have shown that even though it leads to few choking episodes, it doesn't lead to morbidity and mortality. What are the foods to avoid during complementary feeding? Obviously, we know I have just spoken about choking hazard. So small hard foods which may cause choking, like whole nuts, seeds, hard lollies, raw carrot, chunks of apple. You can give a sliver of apple long enough, no, long to a baby's fist. So that's the length they measure. So if you give a long enough food, that should be okay. But small chunks, bite-sized pieces, they are dangerous. They are dangerous even up to 2 to 3 years of age. And sugar or salt is essentially needs to be avoided till at least 1 year of age as added sugar or salt. So because they can be cause renal solute load as well as sugar can cause tooth decay. But as I said in the earlier slide, for developing countries to improve the nutrient density, sugar is allowed. Cow's milk should not be given as a drink until 12 months of age. Some milk can be added to help with pureeing or mashing, especially that is recommended by WHO and PAHO. Honey, for the fear of risk of botulism, is not recommended in under 1 year of age. Soft drinks, fruit juice, tea, and coffee, these are not suitable drinks for babies. So the only drinks allowed are breast milk and water. These are the only fluids allowed till 1 year of age. What about duration? The duration roughly will vary, but initially, at least once the baby has started, no complementary feeding has stabilized, it should be 20 to 30 minutes. It should not be delayed beyond that. But in baby-led weaning, usually they allow the baby to regulate the timing themselves. What is the amount? As I said, we have now calculated the gastric capacity. So roughly it can be maximum amount of food, 1/4 of a cup between 6 to 8 months, 9 to 11 months, half cup, 12 to 24 months, 3/4 to 1 cup. So that should be the amount of feeds each meal. So this feed should be nutrient dense enough at least to give 0.8 kilocalories per gram. So that's the calculation. We often speak about this responsive feeding. What is responsive feeding? Responsive feeding is responding to the child's cues and feeding the child. Simple. So you encourage self-feeding despite spillage. Spillage is allowed. Messiness is fine. That's the message we should teach the parents, that we are always worried about now child is spilling, child is playing, child is throwing, child is spitting. That is fine. That's how a child will learn to eat. If the child has refusal, you try experiment combinations, you try different tastes, you try different textures. So for example, if your child is not eating boiled egg, give omelette. So this is not a problem. We have our own inhibitions that this should not be given. Cooked egg can be given in any form. So it is only worried about uncooked egg for fear of salmonellosis. So any egg is fine. So we have to be innovative and experimental during complementary feeding. Never threaten, force feed or punish the child during eating or for eating abnormalities. Always minimize distractions during feeding, and remember that feeding times are periods for learning and love. Allow the baby to feed during family feeding times. Even a 6-month-old baby, even if you have fed already, allow the baby to be with you during your feeding time. What about supplements or fortification? In fact, fortified complementary foods or vitamin mineral supplements are needed. This is a WHO statement, especially where nutrients are lacking in the regular complementary feeding. But this is a costly proposition. This is also advised for pregnant as well as lactating women. We know about vitamin D universal supplementation for all infants and iron supplementation for preterms starting from 1 month of age. Let us see about very simple myths. These myths just sum up what I have told already. The first myth is fruits and vegetables are the best first foods. No, the best first food probably iron-rich food, because that is a limiting nutrient. That is a problem nutrient. So iron-fortified cereals, pureed meat. We have an inherent some stop clock in our watch that meat cannot be given at 6 months of age. Fine, it can be given. It has been given. It has been given throughout the world. It is fine. The second myth is food before 1 is just for fun. Okay, it is not really important. Milk is the most important source. No, babies almost receive 50% of energy by 9 to 11 months, and almost more than 85% of all micronutrients only from complementary feeding. The next myth is baby is ready for solids by 4 months. Even if the baby is ready, keep a close watch on growth chart too. it is not developmentally or physiologically, that is GI and renal readiness, which is enough, but what is best for the baby. So keep a chart, keep a close watch on the growth chart. If there is a growth faltering, if the baby is developmentally ready, if it is more than 17 months, yes, for that baby you can start complementary feeding, but by definition you should not start all babies by 4 months, or for that matter without seeing the baby, without examining the baby. You just can't allow the baby between 3.5 months when the third vaccination is given and 6 months. You can't allow without a baby examination. The next myth is baby-led weaning will cause choking. This has been proven that even though there is gags, more number of gags, children who undergo this process of baby-led weaning, ultimately there is no increased mortality or morbidity proven by the few studies. These are good studies which have proven that there is no increased risk of choking hazards. And this is the biggest myth of them all. Babies need teeth to chew solids. So they don't introduce chew solids or finger foods till the baby develops their dentition. If the baby develops dentition only by 10 months or 11 months, solid foods are delayed even beyond that. Baby can chew with gum, especially the posterior ones where the molars are supposed to erupt, which is quite strong. They can chew at 6 months of age, semi-solid diet. Liquids like soup, dal water, rice water, these are good. These are best as initial complementary foods. The energy density can go as low as 0.3 kilocalories per gram. So practically you need to give 3 times the stomach capacity, which is impossible. So that's why growth faltering happens during complementary feeding. Giving calorie dense, giving foods which have a much lesser calorie density than what we are intended to give. Fruit juices are a great way to complete the baby's diet. So I have given 3 meals, so 1 fruit juice should be fine. Humans have an inherent preference for sweet foods. So your baby might take fruit juices, but that will displace from whole fruits as well as the bitter vegetables. Vegetables have an inherently bitter taste. So unless you introduce them early, they are going to cause food rejection later in life. In fact, excess fruit juice can cause diarrhea, growth failure, short stature because of that less calorie density. But if you are going to give more of fruit juice, if the child is addicted to that, child can even end up in obesity. The last myth is no egg whites, no nuts before 3. This is the standard teaching, based on the AAP previous recommendations. The American Academy has changed their recommendation. We yet have to change. Egg, including egg white, can be started as soon as complementary feeding is started. There is no increased risk of egg allergy. Nuts can also be given. The only risk is regarding choking hazard. So you can be given in the mashed form, pureed form, not in the whole form because of the choking hazard, but it can be introduced as soon as the complementary feeding is started. So probably our grandma's teaching of by 8 months having a multigrain mix where nuts, pulses, cereals, all are, that is fine. That can be given. We need to have this fear of not giving nuts before 3 removed. All American Academy of Pediatrics allergy, American Academy of Allergy recommendations have changed. In conclusion, what can ultimately result in, as I said in my first slide, improvement in linear growth is by improved complementary feeding. So can I do that? Has it been proved? But the studies show throughout the world, it is not enough that you just educate, nutrition education and maternal counseling alone. They are not going to result in improvement of stunting. They are improving the weight of the children, but stunting is not changing. Why? Because in low and medium income countries, the problem is of food shortage. The provision of complementary foods as such, somehow the complementary foods, whether in ready-made form or ready-to-use forms, should be provided to children so that it can result in improvement in stunting. The studies which have proved improvement in stunting have employed direct provision of complementary foods. So this is the final slide. Although there is no magic bullet for improving complementary feeding, a well-planned approach can be highly effective. So these are the references. In fact, I would like to all of you to read on this Dewey and Brown update on technical issues in complementary feeding. Many of the recommendations are based on solid scientific principles based on many of these trials. This is a review on that. Again, nutrition and diet in infants age 6 months to 1 year. This in fact gives other nutrition related topics also. This is a book, Early Nutrition and Long-Term Health, published in 2017. As always, we have WHO's guiding principles for complementary feeding, both in breastfed and non-breastfed children, and our own IAP's infant and young child feeding guidelines. So, as I said, I do have a YouTube channel. My idea is to debunk these myths regarding all of these child as well as even adult health. People have strong notions about health and disease, but they are not based on science. My idea is to debunk these myths using social media, because that's the most powerful medium today. So where I regularly release at least 2 videos per week on related to nutrition, child health, adult health, diseases, everything. I thank once again IAP TNSC, President Aram Sindil sir, Suresh Balan sir, Rajendran sir, and every one of you, Professor P. Ramachandran sir, my guide, for allowing